she was rescued at the age of 30 by a gentleman who worked for the CIA, many of these agencies, who actually knew how to get her out of the brainwashing. And her daughter, the young daughter, was born into it, how to help them get out of it. And he has since passed, and pretty much it was a slow kill. They took him out. But at the age of 30, they were going to sacrifice her. And she was, and people don't believe this, but you could go onto my Substack and see it. But she actually had a congressional testimony, and they would not even let Congress hear her testimony because of national security, reasons of national security, because she was going to the White House. She was being used as a child sex slave for Clinton, for Hillary Clinton, for Reagan, for George Bush. She talked about how George Bush Jr. and she were thrown out into the woods, and they'd have these foxhound hunts where she and even he were running around and they're going after them. I mean, he was also traumatized. So what she was saying is this: we are now decades, especially since JFK's assassinations, we are decades into a ritual abuse that we have all been traumatized over and over and over again. From JFK, all the other additional assassinations, from 9/11, from the Oklahoma City bombing, from all the school shootings, it doesn't end. And that is by design. And when you're traumatized like that, you're very, very easily manipulated and led. And when I saw how people in my community who I knew so intimately turn, I knew it was psychological. I knew it was a psychological operation.
Welcome in. I'm Kimberly. I'm so excited you're here today. This guest is so special to my heart, and I can't wait for this conversation. If you're enjoying this content, make sure you click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And if you would rather listen than watch, you can find us on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, all the podcast platforms. Just type in Journey to the New Earth, will pop up, and it's a good listening time for you. In addition, if you'd like to keep track of what's going on around the planet, but it seems a little overwhelming, and I don't blame you, you might want to sign up for our Friday morning email newsletter. The link is in the description box down below. Every Friday morning, we send out a very short, very sweet, but very informative email newsletter highlighting what we think are the important events happening around the planet. It's super easy to sign up. You click the link. It's super free. I think you're going to love it. And with that, I would like to welcome in a very special guest, Reinette Senum. How are you, Reinette?
Good, Kimberly. Thank you so much for the invite. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm excited. Now, Reinette, you might not be familiar with her. I am, because she comes from my territory, Northern California. Reinette is a two-time mayor of Nevada City and former gubernatorial candidate of the state of California. She's now working very, very hard to make some changes that are probably for the benefit of humanity, working towards that new earth. And I am a member of her Substack. She has a fabulous Substack. I believe it's called Foghorn Express. Is that correct?
That's right, the Foghorn
Okay.
Express.
And she has started a new series on her Substack called The Cosmic Game. And I read that and I thought, oh yeah, let's have this conversation. So Reinette, I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly. Well, it's great to be here. Well, also you're saying that you're from my neck of the woods, and 4 years ago now is when I was mayor and COVID struck. And it was just such I'm going to tell you, it was a game-changing moment, but boy, was it ever silent out there right away. And interestingly enough, when I was mayor, I was supportive at first, those 2 weeks for the stay-at-home orders, just so we can kind of figure out what was going on. And I'd become kind of privy to COVID like in January early on. And it just caught my attention. It got my instincts kind of riled, like what's going on. And then after 2 weeks of stay-at-home orders, I was basically starting to see behind the scenes as mayor, with county officials, with public, the public health department, with the city mayors and managers. I started seeing something in government I'd never seen before, which is this kind of top down, just do as we say, don't ask questions. And when I start to ask questions, during these weekly Zoom calls with county and city officials, I'd be muted, I'd be ignored, I'd be, told to hold off and wait for your blades in the grass questions. And I started to see early on by spring of 2020 that they had an agenda, and the agenda was everyone had to get vaccinated, and that was in springtime. And that was just horrible for me to realize this, because a lot of these individuals were friends of mine, people I'd worked with, I've known for years. And so I had already won my third election as city council, and I was ready in July. Oh, actually, then we had the mask mandates. And when we had the mask mandates, I actually went down to our city police chief, and I said, hey, do you plan on enforcing these? And he said, oh, I don't know how. There's these mask mandates. He's like, I don't know how I'm going to enforce the mask mandate. It doesn't come with the penal code, and it doesn't look very constitutional to me. I'm like, thank you very much. And so at that point in time, basically, I went back home. Peggy Hall, the Healthy American, had a wonderful video on how legislation is made, how laws are made. I'm like, perfect. Thank you so much, Peggy. She was one of the very few voices out there at first. And so I put that on my Facebook page with a very strong, bold statement. I did that by design because I was trying to get people's attention. I was hearing no other elected officials in the state of 40 million people calling out Newsom, calling out an illegal mandate. And I said, basically, as you go about your day, you can wear a mask or not wear a mask. Basically, the governor does not have unilateral power to do this. And all hell broke out. And so, as you can imagine, from Sacramento Bee to San Francisco Chronicle to LA Times, on the front lines, ripping me to shreds, saying, Mayor says don't wear a mask. I'm like, no, I'm just saying a governor does not have unilateral power to force a medical device on every single person's face in this state. That's what I'm saying. And I stuck to my guns. And so, as you can well imagine, and as you know, Nevada City is a little tiny town, little hamlet, like 3,100 people, raised here my whole life in this county.
Adorable town. I mean,
Adorable.
It's picturesque, perfect place to
It's an
live.
adorable little, Victorian homes and shops. Like Hallmark comes here and makes movies all the time, and it's very sweet. And it was very active town, not only like outdoor active, but just also going down and and campaigning and lobbying for legislation. And we were activists, and we have the largest environmental film festival in the world here. And so highly engaged and motivated. And I was horrified by how the town specifically was responding. And so of course, as you can imagine, my town was basically regarding making my stand around the mask mandates. They're saying, we hate her, we love her, we hate her, we love her. And of course, here's a little city hall in the crosshairs. And so come July 8th of 2020, I'm ready to step down as mayor. I'm on a Zoom call with my city council meeting because no more in-person meetings. And instead of taking my oath for the third time, I actually read my resignation letter. And when I read that, I said basically a couple very important things. I said, first of all, there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Leonard Hardell, who was the one who convinced the World Health Organization that Agent Orange was a cancer-causing agent. And once they did that, they went to all the different heads of the chemical companies and said, you got to stop spraying. And they didn't. So they took them into the world courts. And when they did, they only had to ask one question, which everybody out there right now should be asking their elected officials and all those decision makers out there. There's only one question to ask to determine whether or not you're making or committing a crime against humanity. And that question is, what did you know by when? So I'm resigning. And I said to my city council, I'm asking all of you right now, we're going to come back in 3 to 4 years. And we are at 4 years now. We're going to hold your feet to the fire to the highest extent of the law. And we're going to ask you the question, what did you know by when? Because I have this information available to me. This information has been made available to you. I've gone out of my way to bring experts in the respective fields to give you really informed information so you can be a better elected official, and you've ignored it. You won't even look at it. So here we are 4 years later.
Yeah, I want to inject with a little backstory about Reinette. Reinette was born and raised in this town.
Born in San Francisco, but raised here since I was 4 years old. So it's my hometown.
Yeah, it's her hometown. And we're talking a small town. So everyone knows everybody. I mean, this is a very, very interactive community. Yeah. So it was a different experience for you because these were your people. These were your neighbors, your community, your friends, the people that you saw at the grocery store all the time.
These are the people I would die for. I would have died for this town. I love this town. This town was I as a city council member, as a mayor, we work for free. There's no pay. They just changed that recently, by the way. It was kind of crazy what they did. They've got now health insurance and medical, dental, and now they're getting paid. It's like, wait a second, how did where's that money coming from? But for me, at the time, we didn't get paid. And I didn't care. And what I was doing was I was averaging about 2,000 hours a year of volunteer work. And that was me just paying it back, paying it forward. And my objective was to create the world that I wanted in my community. If I was going to better the world, it was going to be starting with my community. So that's why over a course of 20 years, I started the founder of the organic farmers market, the first one in the county. We started an Apple organization called Alliance for a Post-Petroleum Local Economy, all about local sustainability, not the United Nations version, but the mom and pop version, really increasing our food network and helping those who are homeless, starting a warming shelter for the homeless in the wintertime, building a fleet of homeless shelters on wheels, rickshaw handles on wheels, taking it out to the homeless at a place to sleep off the ground, doing really vital studies on like how we can actually, our city can survive, electricity or energy disruptions, short, mid, long term. My objective was to make ourselves stable no matter what was happening in the world. And when COVID struck, that scenario never dawned on me.
Yeah. Why
That,
would it?
no. And
What?
when I walked out of my front door one day, a very dear neighbor who I absolutely loved and adored, and we're just barely now starting to communicate a tiny bit 4 years in. And he came up to me, he said, Reinette, I'm so upset. You're speaking against masks. You're saying people don't have to wear masks. I need to go to the restaurants here and there, blah, blah, blah. I said, look, I said, I just want to let you know that as mayor, I'm getting the phone calls. I'm getting the calls of distressed people who have been raped as a child, right? Or as a woman, an adult, and had their faces and their mouths muffled. So putting a mask on their face gives them PTSD. There's people who have, asthma, they have heart conditions, they can't. And basically people had already, and because this is such a community that is so community oriented, that when I was not going along with save your grandmother, save your neighbor, they looked at me like, Reinette, we thought we knew you. Who are you? We thought you cared. And obviously we don't know who you are. And I was trying to say to them, look it, Fauci doesn't know your name. Fauci doesn't know Nevada City. Fauci doesn't give a rat's ass about you. I've invested in you. I've invested in our future. I care about this community. And I'm telling you right now that I'm doing everything I can beyond any other leader in this county to get the real information to you and to tell you, A, you don't need to be so afraid. B, you've got a beautiful body that if you just boost up its immunity, you'll be okay. And three, the last thing you want to do as a former house painter of 35 years who had industrial bronchitis because I wore my N95 mask, that was dirty, that I wore it incorrectly, I wore it too long, I was suffering from injuries of my N95 mask, and I brought in HVAC mask experts to ask them specific questions. And all I can say is you don't want to wear it all the time. It's bad for you. The community couldn't hear it. The community could not hear it. And to this day, I'm pretty much a devil incarnate.
Yeah. So this is what I want to get to. I want to unpack what happened and why it happened, because if we can figure out why it happened, it makes more sense and we can make wiser decisions in the future, because it
Yeah.
looks like they're going to play the game again.
100%.
Why do you think that there wasn't that ability to think clearly? And I'll bring up the thing that just makes me nuts. Not only was the mask, and I got kicked out of so many places because I just wouldn't play,
Yeah.
but those little arrows on the floor,
Yeah.
it's like you can't fix a pothole in 5 years, but all of a sudden these little arrows showed
Yeah.
up in a week and a half.
Yeah.
And the plexiglass,
Yeah.
that's ridiculous for an airborne anything. That alone just made the thing, we just went crazy for a while there.
I recently I interviewed Kathy O'Brien,
I
who's
know.
very well known for surviving ritual abuse since she was a child. Her father actually sold her into the MK Ultra program. And she was rescued at the age of 30 by a gentleman who worked for the CIA, many of these agencies, who actually knew how to get her out of the brainwashing. And her daughter, the young daughter, was born into it, how to help them get out of it. And he has since passed, and pretty much it was a slow kill. They took him out. But at the age of 30, they were going to sacrifice her. And she was, and people don't believe this, but you could go onto my Substack and see it. But she actually had a congressional testimony, and they would not even let Congress hear her testimony because of national security, reasons of national security, because she was going to the White House. She was being used as a child sex slave for Clinton, for Hillary Clinton, for Reagan, for George Bush. She talked about how George Bush Jr. and she were thrown out into the woods, and they'd have these foxhound hunts where she and even he were running around and they're going after them. I mean, he was also traumatized. So what she was saying is this: we are now decades, especially since JFK's assassinations, we are decades into a ritual abuse that we have all been traumatized over and over and over again, from JFK, all the other additional assassinations, from 9/11, from the Oklahoma City bombing, from all the school shootings. It doesn't end. And that is by design. And when you're traumatized like that, you're very, very easily manipulated and led. And when I saw how people in my community who I knew so intimately turn, I knew it was psychological. I knew it was a psychological operation. And this is the other thing. When everyone came out of the stay-at-home orders, and let me tell you, my partner and I, God bless her, we knew immediately the people who were like-minded. I'm sorry I didn't know you back then. We actually brought people who we did not know, except for just a tiny couple, two or three of them, did not know, but we were all like-minded, which is like we believe in medical freedom, medical choice, our First Amendment rights. And so we had a weekly potluck for 4 years. And now we're going to once a month, right? But we just came together, and you could say any discussion, put it on the table. You were not going to be judged. You're always included. You could speak freely. And we did that to survive. But what I saw was after everyone came out of their stay-at-home orders, I happened to be down in a little cafe sitting in the back, and I see people I know, I recognize them, their children, their teenagers, and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, their faces, they look like they have PTSD because they're walking around and they're like this. They're just like, and they're walking around like, oh, they had not walked around. And so they just were like in shock. I'm like, wait, where does that face? What does that remind me of? What does that remind me of? And finally, I thought to myself, I know that face. That reminds me of when I went to Hurricane Katrina after it happened. I went twice, and people were in such shock for months. For months, they just had that glaze. It looks like they had just been traumatized. And I'm thinking, wait a second. How did everyone get traumatized behind the safety of their closed door? Not out at all. So what's traumatizing them? Guess what was traumatizing them? Their screen.
Yeah.
Their screen. The media. If they drove some there, it was billboards, this, that, but it was over day in, day out. And so ultimately, there's two different things that happened specifically. We'd already been, of course, prepped for generations to be in this fight or flight, constant fight or flight. And that closes down your brain, being able to think on the spot, think creatively, just tell me what to do. The other thing that happened was they were using what's called fear appeal. Fear appeal is a very, very old practice that is taught in public health. And what it's about is basically scaring people into such a pressure cooker that they're willing to capitulate. They just want the answer. So like they'll teach you don't drink and drive, don't smoke and be pregnant, all these different things. And so, but they'll keep that pressure on so much, like, just give me the answer. What do you want me to do? And you'll do it. But this was on steroids. This was fear appeal being completely weaponized at a whole other level. Kimberly, you could not turn anywhere and not see someone wearing a mask, not seeing a billboard saying, be afraid, going online, seeing, be afraid, opening up your newspaper, be afraid. On the county website, we had the COVID dashboard, which had the deaths, which we had 2 deaths for like 8 months, 2 deaths in big red letters, but be afraid. You couldn't escape it. It was a psychological warfare that continues today. In addition, when you look at all the steps you're taking, which is like first isolation, omnipotence, other steps of arbitrary enforcement, there's these 8 steps that have been used. They've identified with prisoners of war, and it's called Biderman's chart of coercion. Just 8 simple steps that you could actually put onto people to, again, get them to capitulate to whatever their demands are, to brainwash them and get them to do whatever they are. And COVID was hitting that mark, those 8 marks, day in, day out, day in, day out. Americans per capita took the shot more than anyone else in the world.
I didn't know that. I would
Yes.
have thought a European country would have
Nope.
been more
No.
compliant.
We were. And the reason why is you've got the social media, you have everyone's on prescription meds, like what 74% of Americans on prescription meds. So they're also compromised there. You have our news. Our news is unlike any other news in the whole entire world. I've traveled to 60 countries. I see what the news is like everywhere else. And it is be afraid, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid to know. By the way, take your meds. Be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. Oh, by the way, take your
Brought
meds.
to you by Pfizer.
100%, right? So we were just the ball was set up in the net for a long, long, long time. And so when I saw that, I also realized, so in July, when I stepped down, July 2020, I stepped down. After that, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I did start doing interviews. And it was at the time it was called Reinette Senum's, Chew on This. And I was just trying to bring in these different experts to actually educate people. Well, now we got like tons of people out there interviewing and tons of podcasters. So I'm always trying to figure like, well, what can I give and what angle can I come from that's, nobody else has that I have. And so it's always a constant, like you're always, redeveloping, recreating yourself. But at that time, I was just trying to bring different people on who could give information so people could make informed decisions, which was not
Yeah.
happening. And then my objective became to really inform people around the vaccine to say, hey, look at guys, you have this beautiful, God-given immunity. All you need to do is boost it up. And I was saying, let's go out there and send out vitamin C, vitamin D, K, zinc. Let's go out there and disperse these things. And the county and the officials didn't want to hear it. So I waited for months, waiting for people in the state of California to speak up. And at that time, Newsom was having a recall election, and I had people asking me to run. And I said, no, I have no interest. And then again, after a couple more months of nothing really happening, I'm like, okay, I'll run. And I had certain conditions on how I was going to run: no party affiliation, using what's called the seventh generation principle as the foundation of the campaign, which is every decision you make today should serve 7 generations from now as our measurement of our leadership. And I began to run. And I have to tell you, when I ran for governor, the censorship was unbelievable, unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. Very coordinated. And yet, as I was running, I was talking to all different walks of life. And really, we do not have the division. That division does not exist. They say 80% of people agree with 90% of the topics, and I have to agree with that. Most people want to have a safe neighborhood, be able to afford rent or their mortgage, put food on the table, good education for their children, a future for their children, neighborhoods where they feel safe and close, and they have access to a lot of different things in the world. And that's it. That's it. And there aren't a lot of differences. And so now with COVID and the extreme things, like we're seeing the whole LGBTQ stuff, the transgender stuff, well, that's all engineered. That's all engineered wedges to divide people. But when it really comes down to it, we basically all want the same thing.
Yeah, we do. It's
So
team humanity. I call it team humanity.
And it is team humanity. So I ran for governor. The censorship was unbelievable. In fact, on January 10th, 2022, I was in Pasadena campaigning. I flew down. So I was a little bit dependent upon Uber rides and Uber Eats because I didn't have my car with me. My partner was going to drive down like a couple days later and join me with all my stuff that I used for the campaign. And my campaign creative director had called me. She is living in Florida, in Memphis, Florida. She moved from California, her and her kids and husband, because they got doxxed. She was speaking up like we've been speaking up, and they were going after her children. So she moved them all to Florida, but she was still helping with my campaign because she wanted to know, she wanted to support me. And like, I'm not moving back till we have a different governor. And she calls me up on January 10th, 2022 and says, Reinette, have you seen your Instagram account? I said, no, I haven't. She goes, they took it down. And I said, what? She goes, I said, my gubernatorial campaign was taken down. She goes, yeah. And I said, that is the most docile social media account I've ever had. And they took that down without warning. She's like, yeah. So I go on there. Then I see I'm on Facebook jail. They've put me in jail for the first time for the next 3 months. Basically, all your posts would be at the bottom of the feed. That had never happened to me. And then I'm like, let me just go order some coffee from Uber Eats, get some food so I can just kind of, wrap my brain around this. And I go onto Uber Eats, and I come to find out that Uber Eats and Uber Rides had sent back all of my money while I was on the campaign trail and closed down both my accounts. All of this happened the exact same morning.
I'm stunned. I'm sure you can tell I'm stunned. I'm shocked.
Yeah. All four of them just boom, done. We're done with you. And then in addition, so that's just like there's many other things that happen too. And even to this day, like, PayPal and Venmo and Zelle, like I can't use them. They won't let me use them. And when I was asked, the San Diego Union Tribune had a request for all the gubernatorial candidates, which was like 26 of them. They had a Q&A available for us. Like we have all these different questions. And so I was one of only 6 people in all the candidates to actually answer the Q&As. And so I did that, and there were awesome answers. And I was calling out BlackRock, being, like, what are you going to do with, homelessness? And I go, first of all, stop letting BlackRock and Vanguard and Blackstone buy up all the housing stock. And then BlackRock actually interjected themselves and contacted the San Diego Union Tribune and said, this is not true. We don't do this, which we know is actually true. They do. And they put a disclaimer on my answers. But before that happened, the 6 candidates were in the San Diego Union Tribune. The same owner of the Tribune also at the time owned the LA Times, and they had all the Q&As in the LA Times, except for they took mine out. They did not include me in that. So when people would say to me, and we also, the other thing too is interesting is the 2 oddities. One is there's several people who started to run really, really late in the campaign, right before the deadline. No money, no website, no platform, nothing, not on the campaign trail. And they like 2-3 times my votes. I'm like, how's that even possible? And what we knew was that 2 years before, when Newsom was elected, or 4 years before, sorry, he only got 2.5 million votes out of almost 20 million voters, right? But only 2.5 million votes. And I knew from being on the campaign trail that people could not stand Gavin Newsom, which I'm pretty sure they're going to try to put him into Biden's place. They're going to have him actually run for president. I can tell you that right now. And so people were absolutely disgusted with him. They're tired of the homeless issue, the water issues, the drug issues, the robbery issues, all of this, all the crime. And across the board, people who voted for him were no longer voting for him. So 4 years before, he got 2.5 million votes. And all of a sudden this time he got over 4 million votes. And I got like 54,000 votes. I'm like, I was like, how did I only get 54,000 votes when I was actually one of the most active candidates out there? So we know for a fact, we've seen them in other states, that they have the machinery to actually steal the votes and give them to somebody else, which we have no doubt this was done for Newsom, because he did not double his votes 4 years later.
Yeah, certainly not with what has happened in California. Certainly not.
Right.
From where I sit, Reinette, and I've lived in California all my life. I left recently, you know that. It looks almost to me like a controlled demolition.
100%.
And if I was going to take over this country,
Yep.
what would I do? I would start with the coasts.
Right. Well, that's where most of the population is. That's where the ports are. That's where the breadbasket. We have all this food. We have massive water wars going on here. In fact, I did a Substack a year ago, but I'm going to repost it and rewrite it and add some more things. But they're like, we don't have water. We don't have water. Well, we've had plenty of water now for the last 2 years. But what they've been doing, and they're still doing it, is they're taking the water. And what I found out from a woman who actually went out there to all the water districts and all the public meetings and gathered all the information. Her name's Elaine Buxton. And she's looking at public documents. And what she found out was that the state of California and these water boards were using, and the media were using, poster child reservoirs like Lake Mead, like Mount Shasta, like Folsom. And they were using them as a poster children, saying, hey, look we have no water. The water's at record low levels, not telling you that all the other reservoirs are as higher than historically, historical average. And they were also taking this water and they were pumping into our aquifers, not telling the California residents, and they were shipping it to Arizona and pumping into reservoirs and aquifers there, then telling us we were running out of water. Therefore, the farmers couldn't get water. They had to sell their land. BlackRock and Blackstone were coming on in, buying the farmland, pennies on the dollar, as well as basically justifying the increase in rates of water and rations and so on. It's not that we were running out of water. They've been hiding the water. They've been stealing the water. It's been actually a psychological warfare program to convince us that we don't have water, A, and B, it's not our human right to have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I have heard many times from many interviewees that the corruption is so systemic and so deep in our political system that one election is not going to solve it. Changing over one candidate for another is not going to fix it. It's got to all come down. And I've been thinking about that today is that because you were in it, you were part of it, and probably one of the most noble politicians I certainly have come across. Is that your opinion? Do you think that that is actually the case?
Yeah, I do. I've had a lot of people ask me, and I said, unless you had something like me as governor, but even then, you're fighting upstream because you got the legislators. Right?
Hmm.
I mean, and I've been on a city council where I'm the only one voting a different way. And I'm speaking on behalf of the people. I'm calling out the corruption. I just get dogpiled when that happens. I've been dogpiled over and over and over. I mean, I have very thick skin and a fast rebound because of this. But when you're the solitary fish swimming upstream, it's an uphill battle. But my objective was to actually enlist the California citizens, to actually get them at the local level, say, look at, yeah, we're gonna, I will veto stupid legislation. I will support intelligent legislation, especially legislation that supports the seventh generation principle. But I'm actually asking you at the local level to start doing these specific things to get control again of your government and your lives and your world and your future. And that's
Hmm.
what I was going to do, was just kind of almost sidestep, like, do my legislative duty, but then sidestep and actually go to the people and say, okay, you guys, because I'm really good at motivating people. I know how to gather people. I know how to get goals going. I'm a hands-on person. I know how to do that. And that was my intention. But to be very frank, and it's happening at a local level, the cancer is so metastasized. It is so bad that I tell people you have transnational corporations, you have criminality that is literally masquerading as a government today.
Yeah.
And people say to me, when I tell them the things that the government's doing, they're like, Reinette, our government would never do that. Our government would never do that. And I'm like, you are absolutely 100% correct. The government that you were taught as a child, the government that you've been told and led to believe that exists here, that government would never do these things. But that government does not exist. Once you reckon with and reconcile that is actually a criminal cabal, a global criminal cabal masquerading as a government, then you can start accepting, yeah, yes, this government would try to kill you with a biological weapon. Yes, this criminal cabal, this government would try to use psychological warfare against you to push their will on you and steal your waters, steal your farms, steal your homes, steal your future, steal your children. Yeah, they would do that.
Yeah, they would do that. And now we're getting to really kind of what the base of the issue is. And I think probably the motivation behind your series, The Cosmic Game.
Mhm.
And I want to bring up, I was really struck by this series that you're doing because it echoes what I'm hearing from other sources. Naomi Wolf is talking on Twitter constantly about this. What is happening on the planet goes far beyond human capabilities to just stir up some bad outcomes. She really thinks we're looking at a force of evil on
Yes,
the planet.
I agree.
Cliff High has been screaming about the Elohim, which is an off-planet civilization, that this is really what's behind what's going on the planet. And when I saw the cosmic game, I thought, you know what? There's just too many people coming up with this conclusion that what we're looking at is a force that is not necessarily human or something outside of it. And I don't know if it's spiritual, it's actually in physical. What are your thoughts along this road? And is that what the cosmic game is all about for you?
It definitely is. So it is very similar to, like, you think you have a government, but you don't. You have a criminal cabal that's masquerading as a government. You think you have leaders that are human, and I'm like, I'm not sure they're human. And
I
if
don't
they,
know how many times I've heard Gavin Newsom being called a lizard.
oh well, and I do have and I've said this in a few interviews. I do have a dear old friend who, when he was lieutenant governor in California, she does hair and makeup for videos and stuff. And she told me this while he was lieutenant governor. She's like, I've done his hair and makeup a few times, and I have to tell you, I've never felt hair or skin like that in my life. And I was like, what? She goes, yeah, it's like rubbery. It's just not real. And I'm like, what? You know? And at that time, I didn't hate Gavin. Now I just can't stand him. I despise the guy. But I said, what do you mean? And so I don't know. I mean, sometimes I have to tell you, Kimberly, sometimes I'm like, are we in the West world? Is this the Truman Show? Are we in a video game? right? I mean, like, what is this? Someday I'm going to just kind of beam up somewhere and walk out into the Starship Enterprise and say, "Oh, that was a real good trip." I mean, I actually, are we in the Matrix? I mean, it does feel like we are, and there, what I don't doubt is this is a spiritual war of good and evil. I have no doubt this is a very, very old line that may or may not be human. It's been going on for thousands of years, and now they're uncovering the mud floods and Tartaria and all these other things, and a history that just Antarctica, where you're like, wait a second, you know, I have no doubt, Kimberly, that we are absolutely living in a world of lies. And I question everything. Everything is on the table. There's nothing that's not on the table anymore. I question everything. I definitely question our reality, but there's no doubt that these entities are sucking the lives out of us, our life force out of us. They are using our children, especially as food. I mean, seriously, when you look at the child trafficking and the adrenochrome and what's going on there, I don't need adrenochrome to survive and to live. I don't need to torture children or do whatever they're doing to them. And this is, we know that child trafficking is a big, big piece of this. And I've said to my friends, I said, I had this realization a couple of years ago when I was with, cats and our dogs that are all happy and they have such good lives. And I thought to myself, our cats and dogs think that all cats and dogs have this quality of life. And what they don't realize is there is a dog and cat meat market in Vietnam and in China. And these terrible things happen to other cats and dogs, but they don't realize it. Just like we don't realize that there is a human market, and it's huge and it's dark. And I think it is literally the bottom of the barrel. It's like the underbelly of the beast. And so I have no doubt that there is definitely a depopulation plan here that we are seeing. I have no doubt that they are harvesting our energy, our bio, our biofield essentially around us. I have no doubt that they are also tapping into our brains with frequencies, and they can actually target us. And this is a lot of this is actually from personal experience that I've seen and I've experienced. And so this is the ultimate spiritual war, and it is very, very old. It's I think it's very, very, like, beyond even Babylonian. It's like even older than that. And it's just now all coming to the surface. And as Cliff High does speak to, you know, we have our DNA, but that second strand is missing. We are the GMO, we're the mutated version. Something happened to us along the way. And so there has been great advancement in the past. And I believe that we are far more advanced in the past than we've ever been led on to believe, that we've ever been educated or even allowed to believe. And so I think that whatever those entities are, the sense I get is they're making their comeback. They're coming back. They're coming back. How does that look? I don't know. But from what I can gather, and again, my own personal experience, we are being harvested at many, many different levels. And that's a hard thing to say.
It is a hard thing to say. I have been doing a deep dive into our ancient history, or at least doing my best to do that. And I'm reading the book by Zachariah Stitchin, where Enlil and Enki first came onto the planet. They're from another reality system, another star system. And it's almost, I don't know if the word is depressing, or it's certainly enlightening, but the same relationship with humans existed then.
Yeah.
In other words, the humans were bred, they were genetically modified,
Yep.
and they were used as slaves
Yep.
to dig for gold. They needed gold, they needed, other things. But when the population got too big, they just sprayed the crops to kill the crops to thin the herd.
And here we are.
And here we are. Everything old is new again. And here we are.
We're repeating history.
We're repeating history. It's just the tools are a little bit different. Now we have social media. Now we have this ability to hypnotize people. And personally, I have not owned a TV in
decades.
20 something years.
Yeah.
So I missed all that programming. It wouldn't have impacted me anyway, because I knew this coming down the pike, this whole kerfluffle. I called it from the beginning and saw where it was going. So it wouldn't have worked at me, but it certainly would have deteriorated my quality of life during that time. having to listen to that. So I listen to music or, do other things around the house. It's that constant programming and the repetition
The
and
repetition.
the lies. And we know they're lying. They know that we know they're lying, and yet they keep lying. Why? Because it works.
Yeah.
You keep lying enough and people will just, give up and fall into lying. They know that. One thing I can say about humans, we have so much potential, but we are, at least right now on the planet, very, very easy to manipulate.
Yes. And that's been generations in the making,
Yeah.
generations in the making. And yet, I also say it's absolutely astounding to me that we're still here and standing. When you think of the GMOs, the EMFs, you think of the fluoride in the water, you think of all the heavy metals being sprayed, blah blah blah. All it's all the vaccinations, the food that's actually chemistry, right? It's not even food. I can't believe we're still here. So God bless the human spirit. Really, we are extraordinary, and it's a testament to the human spirit. So they've tried and tried and tried again to kill us off and to sterilize us, and they just can't do it. So, we have to talk about that. And the other thing that's interesting is that I want to say to people, as hopeless as it sounds, is there are certain things that you can do. I think also listening to the 432 hertz music and really good, healthy music is really important. Making your environment as EMF free as possible. Like I have an Ethernet, I don't have wireless devices in my home. Eating as healthy as possible. My partner, I have an 80-20 rule. 80% is organic, really, really clean. The other 20% is like, whatever, go out to dinner with your friends, enjoy yourself. But, so it's part, food for your stomach and food for the soul. But there's two important things also that people need to understand is that this system has now been set up, especially since COVID, for you to fall in line and just have a certain pattern. And what this system cannot handle is spontaneity.
Interesting.
Spontaneity breaks its back. It absolutely monkey wrenches the system.
Mhm.
So if you keep doing what you're doing every single day, day in, day out, and we as a society do the same thing day in and day out and day out, day in, day out, then they know exactly, they got you exactly where they are. They know what to do. They know how to stimulate you, how to depress you, how to turn you on, turn you off, shut you down. And what COVID did, which I think was unintentional, is that people broke their pattern. They were not going and to work every day, do what they usually do. So a lot of people were actually able to break free. Not everybody, but they were able to break free and start doing some deep diving research, start questioning their leaders and their reality. And that COVID has awakened more people than anything else I know. Are the masses still asleep?
Oh,
Yeah. But COVID woke people up. And,
yeah.
and I was not an anti-vaxxer, by the way. You'll never get in the vaccine next to me ever. Don't meet me, my pets ever again. Keep them away from me. Now I'm an anti-vaxxer because I know too much. But I had shots when I was traveling around the world and stuff like that. I'll never do it again. But what they've done is they've created a massive anti-vax movement where people are actually questioning not just the COVID shot, but all shots, even for their pets. Thank you. Unintentional consequence. Now I realize how dangerous these things are. I mean, you've got your own God-given health. All you need to do is boost your own immunity, and your body knows how to heal if you can bring the balance back. But we're living in a world of toxicity, so it's very difficult to do by design. So what happened was people broke free. They started realizing what was going on. That was extraordinary. Other ones continued to march themselves off the cliff, off to their death, sadly. Don't know if we'll ever be able to reach them. But there's a good percentage that has awakened. So you've got that. And then what Kathy O'Brien had said, which struck me so powerfully, I interviewed her not just to talk about all the ritual abuse she'd been through, which was beyond horrific, and the testament of spirit that she represents, because she's this beautiful, loving, benevolent, kind. She has a type of innocence. I'm like, how did you do that after being through everything you've been through? And what she said was her husband, who worked in deprogramming brainwashed people, taught her that, and of course she had compartmentalized, she had split personality. She had to survive. And so she compartmentalized all these different personalities. But when she would have a memory, he's like, here's your pen and paper, here's your pad, you write down everything. And so she'd write it down. And when she would write it down, she just write everything that was coming, everything that was, because otherwise she'd like forget it again. She just write it down to help her like unlock all that and bring all those broken pieces back together again. So the writing would actually bring to life a certain part of the brain that would connect all those synapses and bring everything back together again. And then she'd write a solution to what it was she was writing, like, well, this terrible thing happened. What could she do? Find forgiveness, find,
Wow.
go for a walk, maybe have a difficult conversation, blah, 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 make a phone call, right? Whatever. Like, what was the solution? And it was writing, which I think is fascinating because of this. You think about it, they've removed cursive writing out of the school system. And I always thought that was for like, so we could not have, our children could not read the Constitution. Our children could not read our parents and grandparents' handwritten letters to divide us and separate us from our ancestors. But I think it was more than that, because I know that when I'm learning something new, I have, especially when it's like more complicated, I've got to write it down. I've got to sit there and write it down until like I really can own it and I could repeat it and actually teach it, right? But I've got to write it down because it stimulates a certain part of the brain, and that is only stimulated through writing. So I really encourage people to do a couple different things. One is go out there and be spontaneous and do the unexpected. The other thing is that when you're grappling with something, if you're struggling with something, if you're depressed about something, if something is bothering you and you can't figure out what it is, just start writing like, well, what is it? When do you get triggered? What does that feel like? And then ultimately, what can you do as a solution? I just need to go take a walk down through the woods. Okay, take a walk, write that down, and then go do it. So these are things that we can actually do. And so there are very simple solutions. And I think what COVID has taught us is that we have a lot more power in our hands than we realize. And we've been separated from it for generations. We have lost that skill, that knowledge, that wisdom. We've been completely severed from it. And we actually instinctively and intuitively know what it is. And one of the ways to find it is actually through writing.
Yeah, I agree. And we've definitely been infantilized over the years.
Oh,
The
gosh.
the amount of sovereignty that we have willingly given away is stunning
For convenience.
for convenience. And it's a slippery slope. Catherine Austin Fitts, who is doing great work in the financial markets and really working against the CBDCs and just overall corruption of government worldwide, talks about we have got to stop funding this criminal cartel who's masquerading as a government.
That's right.
And one of the solutions that she has mulling over, or at least discussing, is the states holding in escrow federal taxes so that we stop funding our demise, so that we're no longer funding the cartel. And I think that that's brilliant. She also has other solutions using cash all the time. I use cash all the time. These small changes that we can make because we do have the power.
Right.
We are the power. That's why so much work has been put into controlling us.
Right.
What do you see, because you've been in a position of government, because you understand how communities work and how they're successful? What do you see as the solutions that are day to day that we can implement that are really going to get us to the place that we're no longer under this subservience to the cartel?
Well, it's definitely everyone has their own personal journey. It's a personal process depending upon where you are in the whole entire system. But what I do say to people is like, you've got to look at your life and see how you can remove yourself from this centralized system that is trying to enslave you and your children. And it could be your job. It could be, like the type of job you have. That's part of that real centralized system. It might be that you have a mortgage, so try to pay that mortgage off. Truly getting your money out of the big banks, getting to a small bank, a small bank that's independent, that respects your privacy, respects that it is your money. It's none of their business what you do with it. Yes, using cash and reminding people. And when you go to places, which I have done, and we tape this and live stream this, especially when COVID was really hot, and you couldn't go into places without your masks and this and that, and you couldn't get service. So one of the things is having cash. And if you go into these places that say, sorry, we do not accept your cash, we do only, cards, you've got to have enough cash. And maybe you have to go a little bit over, but basically like, here you go. This is what it costs with the sales tax, boom, 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 put it down and then walk out. It's like, this is actually recognized as legal tender. You cannot say no to this. You must accept it. And you give them what they want, boom, put it down. And so don't don't back away and say, well, then I won't, take your services. Like, no, no, I'll utilize your services. I'll buy your products. You're taking my cash, and go ahead and call the police because I paid for it. So there's those type of things. And so when it comes to decentralization, truly having a really strong local food network, like supporting local farmers, like with a community supported agriculture called CSA, where you just pay in advance so much money. And then every month you get a basket of, local produce, creating a network of people around you. Like what we do is we have our potlucks and we bring people in who are like-minded. Now we don't have to see eye to eye on everything, but we believe in like our First Amendment rights. We believe in medical freedom. We believe in our sovereign, ability to do what we choose and so on. And this becomes your community, like when the poop hits the fan, essentially. So like when I had a few months ago, I had an appendectomy. I did not know I had appendicitis. I had an operation, wasn't expecting that. All of a sudden, flooding in came all this bone broth and herbal remedies and this and that, blah blah blah. I had everything I needed. They were, just rounding and circling the caravan. And so you want to establish that, and people are like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, it's really easy. What you do is you go out there, it might be something really simple, like you start a community garden, or you take a blighted lot and you plant some sunflower seeds or wildflowers or tomatoes. And what you're going to do is you're going to attract like-minded people. And when they come, you just casually say, hey, I'm holding a little potluck. I'm having a barbecue out here on my stoop on Friday. Do you want to join me? And you start building that network. And this is what I liken it to. I have been looking for many, many years for something that could replace, because and I say to people, this cabal, this criminal enterprise that is masquerading as your government is going to crash and burn because it is eating itself alive. And when the poop really starts to hit the fan, they're going to throw each other under the bus left and right. They're just going to they're not going to have any, they're not going to care who it is they're throwing under the bus. And so when that happens, you're going to have to survive and bridge a gap from the old paradigm to the new paradigm. I don't know if that's going to be 6 days, 60 days, 6 years, or 600 years. I don't know, but you're going to have to bridge it. And so when I was looking at how can we bridge that gap, what are some of the things that we can do in that space of time, I like to turn to nature, and there's something called biomimicry. And biomimicry is a form of engineering and science where they look at nature and they try to imitate it. Like they might look at fish fins and then create a certain kind of material like fish fins that's waterproof, or they'll look at certain birds flying, and they'll try to imitate the wings, or certain dolphins, how they swim, and they'll imitate that for propellers and stuff like that. And so I was always looking for, like, what could we do to create community in a very natural, organic manner that does not require massive organizing skills. And then one day I was looking at and heard they discovered how the bird known as the starling, they're little birds, and they have what are called these murmurations. You've probably seen them together, when thousands of birds will come together and they swarm like a big cloud, and they just left, right, up, down. I'm like, well, who's sending the memo? I mean, who's telling them go left, go right? Who's doing this? Well, they discovered that there could be up to 10,000 starlings in one murmuration. It's an extraordinary sight to see. Well, what they do is there's one starling, and all that one starling does is they're at wings length, and each respective starling pays attention to the other 5 starlings around it, and that's all it pays attention to. So if these starlings are going left, it goes right. If it's going left, they go left. They're going up, they go up. And all they have to do is pay attention to the 5 immediate starlings around each one. So we as community members, we have to create our murmuration. And what we do is we bring people together. They might be your next door neighbor, maybe not. You might not have that kind of luck. They might be a half a mile away or another mile away, or so it might be you and your network of friends. It might be you and your neighborhood. It might be you and your school with other schools, your city with other cities, right? Your garden group with other garden groups. But you create your starling of murmurations, and all you need to do is just pay attention to the immediate starlings around you, whatever form you are in, and then they do the same thing, and then they do the same thing, and then they do the same thing. So like with my community here, my immediate neighborhood, we do not see eye to eye with COVID. But I believe that if things got really serious, that we could like say, hey guys, we're having one over a fire. We're having, a fire meeting over emergency exits and so on. We can get together and say, okay, how do we, immediate 5 of us, how do we communicate? And then can you communicate this to the next group of neighbors, and then the next group? And then that way, all we need to do is pay attention to the immediate neighbors around us, and then they do the same thing. and then they do the same thing. And whether we have communication or not, we are connected. And this is something we can do on the fly. So there's that. And the other thing that's really important, and this is really a doozy, is that back in 2014, I started a time bank. And it's not a bartering system, it's a time bank. And what it is you sign up. And they used to have this all through the mail where they had like an administrator and you'd sign up to the time bank and you would be, in the beginning, you'd be contributed like 2 time bank hours. And what that means is that I would have 2 hours of service in my little account. Well, this finally went online. And when it went online, where you actually have an online bank account, I was like, okay, now I can do this. And so what it is that people would sign up and they put like, these are my skills. I know how to walk dogs. I can make a meal. I can drive you to the doctor. I know how to paint. I know how to sew, da, 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 da. And so, for instance, I would go to someone's house and they're like, I need my front door painted. I would paint their front door. It would take an hour. They would then credit me electronically into my account an hour's worth of my time. Or maybe it was just 15 minutes worth of work or a half hour's worth of work, whatever. I would get that time into my account. And then I go out there and I have somebody, dog sit for me while I was gone. And so this is what I found out is that we have been led to believe that in order for these exchanges to happen, there has to be either zeros and ones on a bank account somewhere, right, on your bank account digitally, or you have to actually have the currency itself. But what people don't realize is that kindness, your own kind exchanges can become a currency itself. And while this was all done digitally with an online bank account, we don't know the internet might go down, the power might go down. We don't know. So all you need to do is get a little brown book, get your own little book, you get a book, you get a book, and you get a book. And it is a system that is based upon loyalty. It's a system based upon trust. And so people say, well, what if somebody abuses the system? Like if they abuse the system, then you don't do exchanges with them. You don't do business with them. But I'd be here like Reinette and I'd have here, okay, I've got 2 hours. And then I go and I do, some work for somebody else. I'm like, okay, Bev, I did an hour's worth of work there. Bev, I initial, you give me an hour. I add an hour to my bank account. And all of a sudden now we've got an international currency because it is international. It's 40 countries. And there's this currency and it's all based upon kindness. Now, that's a paradigm shift. And when this started because I've been led to believe it's got to be gold, it's got to be zeros and ones, it's got to be silver, it's got to be something like that. No, no, no. It can actually just be a good deed. It could be kindness. And the only reason why these currencies are working is because somebody's doing an accounting. There's a system doing the accounting. Well, you can do accounting with kindness. You can do a good deed.
Yeah.
And it changed my mindset so much that I remember in the beginning, around 2015, I went downtown. I forgot my wallet. I was at a local little bakery and I was like, oh shoot, I really love my, a coffee and a croissant. And of course I knew the owner. Shauna said, hey, Shauna. I looked in the back of my car. I'm like, I know what to do. I had all my window washing gear. I said, Shauna, I said, I forgot my wallet. I said, but I see a lot of fingerprints on these windows. I said, if I wash your windows, can I get a coffee and a croissant? She's like, absolutely. So and I had it done and I didn't need my wallet. I had never even thought to think that way. So the thing is that with pen and paper, immediately you can create a currency. You just have to keep keep track of the numbers. And if you think somebody is kind of skewing with the numbers or they're not being honest with it, you don't do business with them or whatever, doesn't matter. At least the exchanges are happening. But that's when I realized that we don't need dollars. We don't need gold. We just need action and somebody keeping an accounting of it.
And a community. And I think that this is how communities used to function.
100%.
100%. So Cliff High talks about what's coming up, the breakdown of the systems as the make-away civilization. In other words, we're going to move into a time where we're going to have to figure out how we're going to do things now.
That's right.
And it's that creativity or that opportunity for creativity that I personally think is going to create an amazing renaissance.
100%.
Because here's that guy who was pushing papers in the back office at State Farm 40 hours a week, hating his life, all of a sudden has the opportunity to start building this little something in his garage.
Right.
He throws open the garage door and he has this solution that his neighbors need. And he's feeling alive again. He's feeling vital. He's feeling excited. He's feeling energized. That's where we're moving into, is the opportunity to really step into that innate creativity, because we're creators. We're wired to do that. That's and right. It's been sucked out of us for decades now, probably hundreds of thousands of years on this planet. So we're really moving into what I see as an exciting time. Is there going to be bumpy stuff? Absolutely. So when you look at how we can step into these challenging changes where we may lose the systems, the food production system, no loss there.
Mhm, mhm.
Absolutely. The medical system, in my opinion, no loss there. What do you see as some, other than that lovely transfer of kindness, that exchange of kindness, which I think is brilliant. Every town, every community should have that. What do you see as some other choices that we can make or start preparing for as we step into this make away civilization?
When COVID first struck, I was saying to folks, they didn't quite believe me. I said, when we go into our homes and we lock our doors for a stay-at-home order, when we come back out, we're going to be living in a different world. It's going to, and people are like,
Oh,
what? Oh no, it's going to be a different world. Might look the same, but it's going to be a different world. And I said to people, what you need to do right now is you need to start looking at what's around you. You might be in an apartment building with a balcony. You might have a suburban, suburbia home with a front yard, backyard. You might be more in the rural area. You need to start looking around at what you have available and see them as assets. And so, and also you have to look at yourself differently. Like, well, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. Well, let me tell you, the internet is still working, the power is still on, and you have the University of YouTube. If there's something you need to learn, you can still learn it right now. You become a carpenter, an electrician, a farmer, right? You can go out there and do whatever. And so you have to really start looking like, what are my personal assets? If I don't have skills, I need to start honing them right now. And you don't have to do everything. You just need to do one or two things really, really well. And so I'll give you an example. I have my house here in Nevada City. We have a little garage where we've been in the middle for many months now of converting it into a rental, a long-term rental. But I also realized that if things get really crazy, we can, and this comes from some, and again, personal experience, we could actually grow some food here and become the local little store and turn that into a local little neighborhood store where everyone comes, they bring their produce, they bring their eggs, they bring whatever they have, and we can sell it there. And so, and I say this because when I was traveling across Alaska, and this was back in the 94, 93, 94, I was in these Athabasca Native Village and Yupik Eskimo buildings, villages, and they all had little tiny stores. But you walk into someone's home, like a log cabin home, you're in their living room, they have a little counter, they have a few shelves, and that was the local store. And so I said, I said, it might end up that you have a garage where it can become the local store for the neighborhood. You might be, which we did, we drilled a well and we have hand pump only, we get 100 gallons a minute. You might be the place that's actually providing the local water. You might be the person that actually you don't have the sunshine for the produce, but you actually can create a worm farm and have the worm castings and sell that. So it's also not about you going out there and having to do every single thing for yourself. It's like, no, no, no. You take on one, two, three specialties, right? Like you're the one growing the tomatoes. You're the one raising the chickens. You're the one, you have the potatoes and the strawberries and the cucumbers. And that's what you do. And then you barter or you sell that stuff. And so I see the world, if it breaks down, it'll break down where you will have certain little depots, essentially, certain little neighborhoods or enclaves where they all take care of themselves. And again,
yeah.
it's Starling. You got your neighborhood, you're connected to that neighborhood, you're connected to that neighborhood. Now, you may not have the resources you need here, but two or three neighborhoods over through the grapevine, they've got what you need. So, okay, you guys can, you can trade. And so right now, you still have the opportunity to teach yourself skills, to go out there to learn how to grow things or to raise chickens or to whatever it is or to convert some buildings so it's actually livable or you can rent it out. And it's also really important to, and this is another thing for us, is we want to take what we had in banks and investments and put it into a physical producing, asset producing form. So we took this garage, it was just storing a bunch of stuff, and we actually make it into an asset that it's now a physical form. So even if the whole world falls apart, we still have this and we can use it one way or another. And so you still have the opportunity. So you have to really sit back and go, what are my skill sets? And like my partner, she's a therapist. She's a family marriage therapist, has been for 35 years. And I remember a few years ago, she's sitting there saying, I don't really have any skill sets that really be good for the, this world and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, are you kidding me? I can't tell you, Kimberly, how many people go to her saying, help me, I'm in crisis. Help me. It's like, we need you for the mental health. You are always people are going to be bringing you eggs, chicken meat, vegetables forever because they need your assistance mentally and emotionally. So don't worry. So that's what I say to people right now. It's like, you've got the opportunity. You have the opportunity to go out there and go, okay, what do I have around me? And it might just simply be that you have a balcony, but you grow the best tomatoes. Or you might have a blighted little lot next to you and you start the little community garden. So these are or you might actually have a little space. And this is where, which we have here actually in our community, we have a space where we have all these little shelves and a little cart, and people will just go out there and these little baskets sitting on the shelf, and they put their excess tomatoes, their excess, cucumbers and apples, and they just put it there and like free vegetables, free.
See, I'm a fan of that. I think every street should have that little nook and everybody puts their leftovers. That zucchini that you can't get rid of and your family will not eat anymore, it goes
100%.
there. Yeah.
We have enough. We have enough to take care of ourselves.
We have enough. We have just been consistently told that there's lack, limitation, and separation, and none of that's true. So I have two questions for you as we wrap up. The first one is a short one. Will you ever run for office again?
Well, not right now, not that I think of. I mean, it would have to truly be, it would have to be like a new government. It has to be like a new round, because I've done it for 8 years. I was heavily engaged for 20 years. And it's an uphill battle, unless you had people just swarming in, which could be possible, and just trying to change stuff. But not right now. But but let me say this, I could always change my mind later on. But right now, I have no intention.
Yeah. And the last question is, it would appear based on the news that they're going to be trying it again.
100%.
What advice do you have for us to stay out of the madness?
Well, I think a lot of people just aren't going to go for it. And I have to just say, this whole bird flu, since when did this bird flu transfer from species to species to species? Only a few years ago, that was like nearly impossible, like never heard of. And now it's happening like this. And now we've got to go vaccinate the farm workers and just understand that, you already got vaccinated before over and over and over again. Did it help you? Are you better off? And if the answer is no, then why would you do it again? Right? The definition of insanity is doing something over and over again, expecting different results. We've already been there. We've already done that. This is take 2, and let's try something different, which is try boosting up your own immunity and really freeing yourself of a system that is trying to centralize you and enslave you and make you ill, make you depend upon it. Like, just whatever you do, try to disengage and reverse engineer yourself out of the centralized system, so you're not dependent upon it, because it is going to try to force you into dependency, so you're forced in enslavement, and that will be a very miserable existence. And we're not there yet, and as long as we're not there yet, there's always hope.
And we have all the power.
We do have all the power, much more powerful than we realize.
Yeah.
You can be the one to set the example. Just one person. And if one other person follows, you can literally have a tidal wave behind you.
Yeah. Wonderful. So how do we find out more about you?
Well, the best place would be my Substack. So it's Reinette Senum's. It's my name, Reinette Senum's foghornexpress.substack.com. But if you go into Substack or Google Foghorn Express Substack, you will pull me up. And so I do interviews, I do video commentaries, I do audios, I do articles, and it's all about, problem solutions and everything else we're not supposed to talk about. And I do really try to focus a lot on solutions as well as giving like kind of a big picture, like people don't have time or they're just incapacitated by all the news. So I just try many times to put out pieces like, okay, this is what's going on. You're wondering why Russia has their ships and submarines in Cuba. How has it gotten this far? Here's the last 15 years, gets you to this point. So you can understand and be more educated, because the more educated we are, the more informed we are, the better our decision making.
Yeah, we could take our world back. And I'll have all that information, all of Reinette's links in the description box down below. Reinette Senum, it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone for
nice
watching.
To meet you, Kimberly. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye everyone. We'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Coming up next, this is a good one. Or you might really like this one too. Either one of them could be perfect for you. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe.